but I wouldn't be using then chocolate as a mood altering substance, because that gets into witchcraft actually, because that's what witchcraft is. Pharmakia is about using a substance to alter our mood, but it can then control us. So we've got to be careful. We are not controlled by things, but we also shouldn't be in bondage to not eating something or whatever. People are hungry for intimacy with God and are able to take every opportunity of engaging that. That will be, what I would see from it. Obviously, it's not obviously about me, and I don't want it to be about me. That's sort of the opposite of what I would really be intending. But because I felt the Father wanted me to make myself more available to people so that I could help people, then that was the motive behind it. But I am aware that people just sort of jumped into it. There are only really a few people that I would say have got access to me in quite a number of different groups that really don't need another private access. So I am going to suggest when I see them that they might like to drop down a tier or two in that way, to give people an opportunity who haven't got it, really. That's really the purpose of it. But Patreon is a good opportunity for people to become supporters of what we're doing, because we will be able then to also help what we do locally, which will be helpful going forward. But it's great, I appreciate people's support and the encouragement that is, and hopefully we can engage people with the Zoom call meeting and give people opportunity to ask questions there and engage. Hopefully that will be more interactive and designed for some encounters and activations and things. So I'm looking forward to that. So Lisa, get your hand there.
Yes, hi. I don't know if you remember me. I bowed out for about a year because my grandchildren are the ones, I sent you an email, that are extremely, extremely ill and have had, my 3-year-old grandchild is on his second bone marrow transplant and is wavering between life and death since January. And so I've been watching faithfully all of your programs, but didn't have the presence of mind to actually engage in real time. I guess my question to you is, it's been a pretty horrendous walk, as you can imagine. And my question to you is, when I do your meditation, your meditation for rest, that's in the Engaging God program, I do it really faithfully. When I get to the framing life part, I really, really struggle to visualize I really struggle to visualize a scenario where, especially right now, the 3-year-old is healthy and well and prosperous. I just keep seeing visual of him the opposite. What would you, how do I engage in a more positive way so I can help him in prayer?
I think by engaging the Father's heart and you carrying him and your family with you into engaging the Father's heart, then it's looking for the Father to reveal how he views it. So you're not seeing, it is so difficult when you're faced with the symptoms of the actual physical thing that's going on to not have that in view. And you can't be in denial. Denial is not the best way of doing it. And a lot of people in the faith movement, they used to be in denial of the symptoms, and it was just like, oh, I'm just professing faith and healing, and they were in denial. You can't be in denial. And actually, by going, engaging with God, engage the throne of grace, then offload to him everything you're feeling and give it to him and be real. And if there are frustrations or where you don't understand, share that with him. Tell him how you're really feeling about the scenario and feeling helpless and not knowing what to do. Just be really real. And cast all those burdens and cares onto him, and then allow him to show you what he feels about it and show you how to brood over that situation. Because what the thing is to brood, and when you're brooding over what the Father's heart is for it, not over what it is presently. Because they may be facts, but the truth can overcome facts. But you want to make sure that you're knowing the truth from the Father's heart rather than what you want to be true. Right. And there's a huge difference between trying to make something happen that we want to happen and brooding over the Father's desires and intentions, and then becoming a voice that is an oracle of those intentions, which can then be creative into calling forth those things. So whenever I'm framing something, I never want to do it independently of the Father's heart, because Jesus only did what he saw the Father doing. And sometimes there are timing issues and there are bigger picture issues that we don't see because we're so focused on the situation that we want changed that we're not really getting necessarily the bigger picture and seeing the Father's perspective on it all, because we're sort of so focused. And it's obviously totally understandable because our emotions are completely drawn into that whole dynamic. And I've never been in that situation in an ongoing sense, but I did when my grandson was sort of around one-ish. He went into hospital with encephalitis, and essentially they were saying that he was on the verge of death. And again, it was like, what do you do? Well, you're sort of positively looking for that not to happen. And so I was able to go and see him. And when I went into the hospital room, I was able to in the spirit grab him, but also I was able to pick him up in the flesh, and I took him into the realms of heaven with me in the spirit, but very, very real, because I had him hold in my arms. And so I essentially just brought him to the Father for the Father to love on him. And then that's all I could do. I didn't know, I didn't have any details. I didn't know anything that I know now. This was probably, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, maybe more. And I didn't know any other thing about brooding and, choosing realities and everything. But my desire was obviously for life. And I brought him to the Father, and I just allowed the Father to touch him. And then within the next day, he woke up. He couldn't see and he couldn't hear. And it was like, well, I don't think that's the Father's desire for him. So I didn't let that fact change what I felt about the Father's desire for him. And within a day, he was seeing and hearing, and they sort of said, oh, he might have long-term hearing difficulties and seeing and all that. And he's had none of those issues. And that's the only thing I can relate to your situation. But it was a crisis situation rather than a sort of a chronic situation. But I just brought him to the Father and just let the Father touch him. And I think sometimes we try and do too much, or think we should do too much. And we're sort of, what can I do? I need to do something. And you get so emotionally involved, which you're naturally going to be, that sometimes it's hard to rest in that place of just trusting the Father and allowing the Father to show his heart to you, so then you can then outwork his heart. And I don't presume that I know his heart. Of course, I know he's a healer, and I know he loves us, but I don't presume to know the details, and I don't presume that I can make the decisions on timing or anything like that. I have to just sort of say, okay, I trust you, and then I'll do whatever you show me to do. And if that's just to rest and wait here, then I'm going to do that. But I'm just going to be open to hear. Now, I know it's hard not to go with an agenda, you know what I mean? Because we're so, well, I want the Father to do something. And it is, if we can go without the agenda and just carry them into the heart, but just offload everything and just come to that place where, Father, I'm just going to trust you, and just see where that takes you. You know, what does the Father's heart reveal? How does he show you anything in that place? I know it's hard because, you know, whenever there's a situation that is like that, you sort of almost like, well, I want to do something. I want it, and it's you're driven towards it. But that can be counterproductive because we can be so tense that it's harder to hear what the Father's trying to communicate to us, because we're blinkered onto one subject, and that is the subject which is on our heart. So first of all, offload all that, you know, cast it all onto him, and then just in his presence, just wait and allow him to reveal anything to you that he needs to, and then go with that. And sometimes it takes a few times at that, you know. Sometimes don't get discouraged when thoughts keep coming into your mind, or don't get discouraged when you find it difficult to engage. That's okay. The Father knows. Just keep basically sharing with him, giving it to him. And I know people say, oh, don't keep taking it back up. But at the end of the day, you're in the situation where this is going on. You can't just be in denial or separate yourself from it, because it's a real situation. And I know people would try and give you advice of this, that, and the other. It's just, I can't give you exactly what it is the Father will show you, but the more you can come to that place where the Father is face to face, or you're engaging his heart, the more then your heart can come into alignment with his on the specifics, if there are any, you know, on what it is that he wants you to do or not do. You know, but it's you know, I feel for you, because it's just not easy when you're in a situation where it seems like you can't do anything, you know. And I've had situations even last year where I'm in situations where something was happening that I had no power over, and I wanted power over it because I wanted it to change, you know, and I wanted to change it. But someone else is involved, and you can't change somebody else, you know, and so you feel somewhat powerless. But that's where trust comes in. Do I trust that God is good and he will bring something good out of this scenario, even when I don't understand and I can't work it out and I can't fathom it out? That's the place when, you know, I have to get to. And sometimes, you know, I had to get to the point where, okay, I am not going to ask you to change this person, because you can't change them to do what I want them to do. That's control, you know. So I'm not going to try and control this person by getting you to try and change them. I can just try and come to the point where I'm keeping my heart right, you know, I'm remaining positive. But bottom line is, sometimes you have to come to a point of acceptance of the situation for perhaps the situation to change, or that you change, you know. And actually in the situation, I couldn't change what was going on, but I changed in it. And therefore, the way I had to go through the emotions. I had to deal with the situation emotionally, deal with the grief of the situation I was feeling, not pretend, go through the process and come to a point where, okay, I still trust you, and I don't understand, but I'm putting my trust into you. And if the situation doesn't change, I've changed. And I now accept that God is good in it, and that if the situation doesn't change, then God will bring something good out of it, even though I would want it to change, you know. But if it doesn't, then I'm resting in the fact that I still trust in God. And sometimes it's like the whole faith thing can be very much like you can't admit there's any doubt, and you can't, and it gets so sort of intense that you can't be real, you know, about it. And with God just wants you to be real with him, and that's, he can take everything you throw onto him, you know, every emotion you've got, you know, you can throw it onto him, you can cast it onto him, you can give him all the burdens. You know, he wants to carry our griefs and our sorrows. So it's a sorrowful situation. You know, you cannot be happy about it, but you can have joy on the inside, which is an inner sense of the rest that you have in your relationship with God, even though the situation is really, really difficult, and, try and, because it's not your child, there's a sense you're one step removed from the scenario. You're not a parent. And you've got to obviously try and encourage the parents to not to get into fear, or because that can create a negative environment, which makes it hard. So by you being positive and maintaining sort of reality, helping them, because I think you can help them because you're able to talk to them, and you're able to be real with them, and so that might be, also part of the thing, that God gives you what you need to be able to help them. But it's not easy, obviously. I really feel for you. You're muted there.
Oh,
thank you. That helps a great deal.
All right. Okay.
We have a question, if it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Mike, can you tell us more how to engage the Father for healing?
And we'll just be a little more specific. We both have been coughing for the last 4 months. And I finally, after praying and then just talking to God about that, I went to the doctor. Maybe that was a mistake, I don't know. But I went to the doctor, and he gave me some medication along with a pneumonia shot and a shingles shot. And within 3 days, I fell to the floor, and I called him and I said, okay, this isn't working, obviously. And he says, well, come on in, let's talk. So I went in, and we're talking about this cough. He said, well, let's go get an x-ray. So I went and got an x-ray. The x-ray showed normal, not a problem. All my blood tests showed normal, not a problem. But there's still this cough there. So I went again. Well, we both went, and he says, well, we're going to give you a Z-Pack, the stronger medication, which worked a little bit. And he says, then we're going to get a chest specialist. And if there's nothing there, then it's pretty much heart disease. So when I heard that, I couldn't accept that. But when I heard your message this morning on renewing the mind, which we can't renew our own mind, I realized that there were some things you were saying there about the reality versus the truth. And can you expound a little bit more on that issue?
Healing is a really difficult subject, because there's so many aspects to it, which are not just, well, I'm sick, I need to be well. Because ultimately God wants us to be in health, not to be continually finding healing. And health is a state of mind, which is really a state of consciousness, which is linked to immortality. Because it's like getting healed over and over again and then dying is really not the best solution. But living in health and being immortal, which is the desire that God has for us, is. So that does require a whole change of thinking, a renewing of the mind around the whole issue of life, death, sickness, disease, all of those issues, which we're conditioned generally by whatever upbringing we've been brought up with, or our experiences in life, or what our view of the medical profession is, and all of that. Now, I'm not against doctors at all. I worked in a hospital for 18 years, in a biochemistry lab. So I think they're there to help. And when you can't operate in health yourself, then certainly I would not be saying don't go to a doctor and don't get help, because they help, until you don't need the help anymore. But it takes time to get to that point where you are now living in a health mindset, and that nothing contradicts that mindset. And that's not easy to get to, because we usually have symptoms that contradict the mindset when we're trying to get into a place of health. Now, I've been through this myself years ago, where, I had an incurable disease, which wasn't going to kill me per se, but was debilitating. It was Meniere's disease, which is a condition of the inner ear, which causes you to have vertigo and lose balance and, feel sick and have tinnitus and lose your hearing, which is, not a good thing. I basically was taking medication to limit the number of vertigo attacks I was getting, because they were really dangerous when you're driving, and your head starts spinning and everything's moving around, and it did happen to me once, managed to pull the car over and everything was just going around, so I used to take these tablets, but the tablets were quite strong and they sort of dulled everything down, which I wasn't very happy with. But I went on a mission. Now I'd been healed 4 or 5 times from different things. Back condition, someone lay hands on me, got healed. Had damage to ankles, hurt them, twisted them, sprained them, instantly healed. So I'd seen healing in different ways of people praying for me, and laying hands on me and getting healed. But this just didn't go. I got all sorts of people to pray for me. I went to conferences and meetings and got people to pray for me. People that I knew had genuine healing ministries prayed for me. It didn't go. So it was like, okay, well, what do I do? So I thought, well, I'm missing something. So I went back to the beginning and spent several years just looking at the whole subject of healing, and realized that the way I was looking at it was conditioned. I'd gone through various cycles of understanding of healing, from being in the Brethren church who didn't believe in healing, from, okay, believing that the gifts of the Holy Spirit, one of them is a gift of healing. Therefore, God could give a gift and heal if he wanted to, but it wasn't guaranteed. And then it was like, well, healing is then in the kingdom of God, and there's the now and the not yet of the kingdom. So in heaven there's no healing, but we're only getting that breaking into today, so we can't expect to be living forever. I mean, all of these mindsets, and it was sort of step by step getting me to realize that when I began to look at the whole subject and look at every Bible verse on healing and really engage around it, and this was back in 1994, 5, I guess, something like that, so quite a long time ago. Eventually I came to the point where I knew that healing was in the reality that God is the healer, and that no sickness is God's desire, and therefore healing is my inheritance. But not just healing, but health is my inheritance. So I went from, I need to be healed from this disease, to I need to live in health. So I got to the point where I totally 100% accepted that was true, but I was still taking the tablets. And, because I was waiting for what God wanted me to do, rather than making a presumption of what I should do to prove my faith. I knew what I believed, and I knew that was true, but I wasn't going to presume that I should dictate what I was going to do. So I waited. And one day I was in a conference, and this whole thing, I was pretty deaf in one ear, and this whole dynamic was ongoing. I was in a conference, and it was like the volume got turned up on the PA system. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? And literally that ear just popped open, and I could hear perfectly well. And it was quite remarkable, because, with half the hearing, you only get sort of half the volume, I guess. And it went up. And then I felt God say, now you can throw your tablets away. So I threw them away. Never taken another one since. But they got tested over the years in various ways. It was all about, what was I going to do with my thinking? What would happen if there was something that challenged my thinking about health. And therefore, and first thing that happened, I threw all my tablets away, but I kept tablets in lots of different places because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to have an attack. So they were in my case, they were in my coat pocket, and I eventually found some of them. And immediately the thought was in my mind, perhaps you better just keep them just in case. Now, if I had said, oh yeah, that might be a good idea, I guarantee I would have got the symptoms back and I would have been back to where I was. But I didn't. I took captive the thought, I don't need them. I live in health. So I threw them away. And every time that happened for a while, and I found them over a few months, I just threw them away. But the thought came. And I rejected the thought and aligned my thinking with, no, I live in health. Then over the next few years, I lived in health. Now, there were I never had a disease, never had a cold or cough or anything, basically, but I did injure myself a few times. And, I remember I was in the kitchen getting ready to go into the office. I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. I was talking to somebody, my wife, I think, and I tied my shoes without bending down, and literally my back was put out. I was in agony, absolute agony. And immediately the first thought that came into my mind was, you won't be able to play football this weekend, because I used to play indoor football on a Saturday with the church. And it was like that first thought. And I was like, no, I'm not having that. I will be playing that day. And so immediately I thought, no, I'm not having this. In fact, I'm going to overcome this. So I walked to work rather than driving, and I was in agony all the way. I couldn't sit down because I was in so much pain. So I walked around the office doing what I was doing without sitting down. And within an hour, all the pain went, literally went. And everything, and because I just totally forgot about it. You know what I mean? It was almost like, not that I was denying it. I just got on with doing what I was doing, and then I walked home in the evening, fine, no problem. And it's always the first thought, and I remember once I was in my bathroom getting ready to go out or something, and I had a feeling, a sense of what I used to get when I had a vertigo attack. And it was a feeling. And immediately it was like, no, I'm not having that. No way. And so I took captive that feeling and says, no, I'm living in health. So to be honest, I've never had anything since. The only time I had anything was I lost my voice because I was doing too much speaking in a conference and stuff, and I couldn't speak for a day. But after the day, it was okay. But so literally, I've been able to live in health, in wholeness ever since without a problem. But I have, again, injured myself, and I've cut myself on power saws and things, and had some nasty wounds. But even then, it's like, okay, what am I going to do with this? I've never been to the hospital. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't go to the hospital if you get a bad cut or wound, because sometimes you need stitches. It's the best thing to do. But each time I checked it out with what do you want me to do? And my daughter, they'll be like, you need to go to hospital. You need to get stitches, Whereas I know I've got too much work to do. I've got stuff I need to finish, using table saw or whatever I was doing, chop saw, table saw. Last time I did it on a thicknesser, which caught my fingers. And I've learned to be a bit more careful generally, but generally then I engage my body and communicate with my body for its speedy recovery. And so when I really cut my finger badly, and took the nail off, split the whole thing open, and I wrapped it up, and I felt, what should I do? Because I could have probably got stitches. I just felt God say, no, you'll see this speedily become whole. And so I showed people what it looked like, and within a week or so, it was completely gone. And there's hardly a mark, and it was pretty bad, and they were like, they didn't want to even look at it, because it was so horrible. But I thought, I'm going to show them, and actually show them, look, this is what you do when you can come into agreement with your body for its restoration, for the restoration of the cells within the fingers and everything else. And several times I've done that. The last time was just before Christmas when I caught two of my fingers badly in a thicknesser, which is a spinning blade at 20-odd thousand revs a minute. And literally it just took two chunks right out of the top of my finger. And there was just chunks missing, you know, but now my fingers are completely whole, not even a mark, because I cooperated and worked with my body for that to happen. And to start with, it got hit it really hard. It was numb, completely numb. So I felt no pain. I went in, got my daughter to wrap it up because, you know, she was like, you need to go to hospital. I'm like, no, it's okay. I'll be all right. You know, as usual. She said, oh, you're going to get infected. But so you have to overcome what other people say and what other people's view is so that you do what you feel you're led to do. So I did. I got it wrapped up. I started to speak to it, engage with it, that there will be no infection. And within 2 hours, it was in agony because the numbness of it being hit wore off. And it's just like, wow, this is, and it was really sore because all the nerve endings are in the end of your fingers. And literally, I'd just taken a chunk out of the end of two fingers. So I had to deal with the pain. You know, so it was like, okay, can't deny the pain. So I'm going to think, well, the pain is there to stop me hitting it again or touching things with it because it will really hurt. So I'm going to try and be very careful about how I treat my fingers because I need to sensitively treat them well rather than, you know, because I hadn't treated them well. So I actually had to deal with how I had carelessly damaged them and own it. And therefore, I then engage my body with my mind to say, I'm sorry for not looking after you better. You know, I need to be more careful and I apologize for the way I've treated my fingers. So I engaged it as a real thing, you know, because my body is real, you know, and so then the pain subsided. And within 2 days, I took off the whole bandages and everything and it was, you know, it looks horrible when you have sort of plasters and bandages and stuff because all your fingers go all sort of messy. I took it off. Within a day, it all dried out. You know, it scabbed over. You know, I was careful because if I hit it, you know, the nerve endings were pretty bare, so it would really hurt. I was careful, and within a week or so, virtually everything had gone, and it's completely well. But I worked with my body. It could have happened as a miracle, like it's just completely restored. And sometimes that happens. But for me, it's always been, I learned something from it. So this time I really learned to engage with my fingers, with the cells of my fingers, with my body, and treat it as a living thing and has with a way of communicating. Because my body communicates to me. You know, and pain is not a bad thing. It's tell you something's wrong. You know, that's what pain does. You know, it tells you something's wrong. So I cooperated with it, and actually it got restored. You know, and completely whole. There's no hole. There's no, you know, groove or anything there. It's whole. You know, but I work with it to bring that about. So I think whenever we're dealing with healing, there are things I would advise everyone to do. First, go to the Father and ask him if there's anything that you need to know. Because sometimes sickness can be an attack, you know. Sometimes it can be genetic. There can be genetic disposition to certain diseases or certain things within our body, whether that be heart conditions or diabetes or whatever. It could be a genetic actual issue. So getting some information about the issue, that's why I'm not against going to a doctor. Just don't believe their prognosis. You know, that's the thing. Don't accept their prognosis. They might, you know, I'm not saying don't believe what they're telling you because they're probably telling you the truth, but that's not necessarily the truth. It's just the facts. They're going to tell you the facts, then align your facts with what God's heart is. That's what I would always do. Now, there might be, okay, you could sometimes you need to, if there's some sort of thing against you or against your family, a generational issue, find out where it came from and why it's within your generation. Do a court case. Go to the court, see if there are any accusations and accusers of your health. Could be there's something within the family line you have to deal with. Get a verdict for you to be restored and made whole and healthy. So there are a number of things to do, which I would always encourage people to go to God with it and find out if there's anything you need to know. Don't just assume that, oh, well, I'm going to be healed. There may be a way of getting healed. There may be the thing you need to deal with, because you don't want to keep getting something back again. So get it dealt with at the source. That could be a genetic change. Take communion. Take on the health and life of God to bring your health. Yes, there's many things which you can do as part of the thing. Sometimes you may need to take supplements, which your body may be lacking in certain minerals or vitamins. Not against any of that. Sometimes you can use frequencies, rife frequencies, generate frequencies, use crystal frequencies. You can use things, use essential oils, anything the Father shows you, then do it. You know, a friend of mine who has gone through several bouts of cancer. The last bout of cancer, basically, she was told she was going to die, and she was, being, sent to the hospice. She just said, no, I'm not receiving that. The Father, she knew the Father's heart. She said no, and she said she was, she's going to go home. She went home. But she did what the Father said, and the Father directed her to take a seer, which is a liquid that you drink, which helps with the cell's ability to communicate in a redox reaction. She used a beamer machine, which is usually used, I think, for circulation, and she took some supplements which are based in some pepper thing and turmeric thing from somewhere out in the East, Indonesia or somewhere, I don't know. And so she did what the Father said, and she asked the doctor to monitor the cancer markers. And they started out at, I don't know, 500 or something, and normal is less than 50 or something, so pretty high. And then they came down to 250, and they're dropping, because she's doing what the Father said, and she's in agreement with him, but she's sensible. She's looking after herself. She gets tired, so she doesn't push it. So you've got to work with your body, getting a good amount of sleep. Look after yourself, get enough rest, get enough exercise, get enough good food. Don't overindulge in certain things. Make sure you live sensibly. So some people say, oh, well, I'll live immortally. I can do whatever I like. You can't treat your body badly and expect to have immortality. You've got to work together in health and wholeness. It's quite a big issue and subject. There are things you can do, and there are new ways of doing things with alternative medicines, rife frequencies, gem therapy, crystal therapies, sound therapies, all sorts of things out there now that I would have had no clue about 20 odd years ago. Longer than that, when I was dealing with my stuff, I didn't know any of it, didn't know existed. But I would not be against using those things, as the Father used tuning forks and all sorts of things that are out there, all things that Christians are using, that there are wellness centers that Christians are opening, that, I know Nancy Cohen has a wellness center in Colorado Springs. They will do they have all sorts of machines and stuff in there, which will help you, come to a sort of therapeutic regime that you need, perhaps, so it's not as simple as just saying one thing. There might be lots of things the Father would have you to pursue, which I would just say, do whatever the Father shows you, but be open and work together with your body to bring it back into health and wholeness. But be careful of fear. Fear is the thing that undermines our trust in God's love and protection and provision for us, and then can create a negative energy in our lives that can make us susceptible to those things. What you do with what the doctor says or medication, I would check that out with the Father. I would never tell someone not to take medication. Only the Father can do that. And I would never do it to prove how much faith I've got. I know people who wanted their eyesight healed, so they stopped wearing their glasses. They were a hazard on the road because they couldn't see, but they were determined to show how they believed in health and wholeness. I used to wear glasses. I don't wear glasses anymore. My eyesight recovered, got better. I didn't really even think about focusing on that. I just noticed one day that my eyes were blurry, and I took my glasses off and they were not blurry with my glasses off. So it's like, oh, I don't need to wear these anymore. And I never wore them since, and I don't need to. But that was a process. I didn't say, right, I'm going to, I didn't drive the agenda in that. I just found that I'm living in health and wholeness, and that's part of it. But it's always the thinking you've got to take captive and then align with what the Father's thinking is. Don't just try and make confessions and confess the truth to try and believe it, because that is you trying to convince yourself. It's like getting the truth from the Father, his heart, that then coming into agreement with that will change how you think and then change how you feel, and you'll find that your whole being will come into alignment with it. But it's a major issue to go from sickness to health to immortality. Ooh. Everything is contradictory to that in the world in which we live. And you'll see all sorts of people will say all sorts of things in a negative sense towards immortality, and you've got to make sure you don't take those things on or listen to them, so that it creates in you that belief system. You have to, we all probably start with a belief system that you're going to die, because that's what we're told. You're going to die one day, and well, I don't believe that that's necessarily the truth. Right. Because Jesus said you can live without dying. You don't need to die. So I'm going to take what Jesus said, but I'm not just going to take it as, oh, Jesus said it's automatic, because I have to cooperate with it. I've got to come into agreement and cooperate, which may mean a change of my behavior and a change of attitude. And I won't abuse my body. I'm not afraid of eating anything. I'll eat anything that I like, but I'll do it in a moderation way. I won't eat tons of sugar. Generally, I'll take my sugar in fruit rather than refined sugar, because I don't really like, I used to have a sweet tooth, but I conditioned myself out of having a sweet tooth by removing the sugar and detoxing from it. So I don't need to eat lots of sugary stuff. But occasionally, if I'm given, a lump of chocolate or something, I'll eat it. I don't have a problem with it. And sometimes I think, oh, I quite like chocolate at this moment. But generally speaking, I wouldn't eat 10 tons of it, and then eat a bar every day, because I know that would probably get me back into a bodily dependence on the sugar and the chocolate stuff, because chocolate is a natural substance. We just add a whole load of unnatural things to it. So really sort of 70-80% chocolate, dark chocolate, has a really beneficial effect on our mood, because it has chemicals in it that are designed to put us in a good mood. So there's nothing wrong in it. It's a natural substance. And there are natural substances that are built into creation that are designed to be health-giving. And you can find some of those out and use them. But I wouldn't be using then chocolate as a mood-altering substance, because that gets into witchcraft, actually, because that's what witchcraft is. Pharmakia is about using a substance to alter our mood, but it can then control us. So we've got to be careful. We are not controlled by things, but we also shouldn't be in bondage to not eating something or whatever. So I eat protein, I eat carbohydrates, I eat, fats, in various forms, but I don't do it to excess in any of them. because I've learned to be healthy in my whole thinking, So I do eat a lot of fruit, probably eat 4 or 5 different sorts of fruit every day because I like fruit. So I'll have oranges and I'll have pineapples and I'll have grapes and all sorts, various oranges, little ones, big ones, grapefruits when I can get them. I like because I like them. I like that's the sort of taste I like, and I quite like lemons and limes, and I like the flavor of lemons and limes. I don't drink much other than water, but I like quite flavored fizzy water flavored with lemon and lime. So that's what I'll drink if I fancy a tasty thing. So I don't drink tea or coffee or alcohol. Not that I'm against it, I just don't like it. And if I did, my body would probably react to it. So I'd rather not. Never really liked hot drinks, so I don't drink them. But I'm not against them. Anyone else can, but I would encourage people to do it, and don't let it control you. Don't let anything control you, because then you are in bondage to it, which is not good. So a healthy lifestyle is important. Some people need more sleep than others. If you need a lot of sleep, make sure you sleep well. I don't need an awful lot of sleep. So, 4, 5, 6 hours is fine. So that's okay. But I treat my body well. So I take exercise. Generally, I'll go into the gym and use a treadmill and walk uphill for, 4 miles every day or most days, because then I'm actually exercising. Because most of what I do is sitting down. When I'm at home at weekends, I'll be working in the workshop or in the garden, and I'll do physical things. But most of them, I'm talking to people sat down, which is not the healthiest thing. So I like to go to the gym, once a day, just because then that gets me into a health thing. In the summer, I'll go out for a walk, when the sun's shining. So it's having balance in it. Don't be out of balance, be whole. So hopefully that will give you some things, but essentially do it relationally with the Father, whatever you do.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Mike, that you're talking about healing and health and the parts of the body coming into wholeness.
Oh.
And then we're right now we've got this global situation with the nations. Instead of wanting to heal relationships with nations, we want to try. We're trying to cut people off. Create divisions and lines in the sand, and call people out as war criminals. And we even had a U.S. senator say that a particular president in this conflict should be assassinated.
Yeah, I did.
And
see
I know the heart. You've talked about the heart of the Father being triumphant mercy. Mercy triumphs in this conflict. And so my sense is there's not a lot of big boys in the room talking about big boy things like mercy. And let's try to understand what this conflict is all about. So in the same way, understanding what was the issue with your hand, what's the issue with this conflict, that we can resolve the matter, as opposed to, okay, let's get all the people on an evacuation route out of Ukraine, and then create other problems somewhere else. And the sanctions and everything else. What is your what's your sense, Mike, as far as what sons should do with the Father's heart, with that triumphant mercy and bringing wholeness into the situation?
I think we should be legislating for peace, obviously, and making sure our hearts are right in it, because you can't excuse what's being done. What's being done is horrendous, and it's people are being killed, and that is not good. It's not the heart of God, and you can't excuse that, because it's not excusable, but you can forgive it. And our response should be immediately forgiveness. Now there's some crazy prophetic stuff out there, most Elijah list and stuff like that, who are basically saying, no, God is using Putin to cleanse Ukraine and Europe and whatever. I mean, it's just nonsense, absolute rubbish. Just don't listen to that type of stuff. But we've got to keep our hearts right. And of course, when you see people in pain and suffering and being killed, you know, you're going to be moved with compassion. Well, what should we do? Well, legislate peace. War is not the answer, but they're not going to sit back and not defend themselves because they've been attacked. And I've been quite impressed with the attitude of most of the Ukrainians I've heard or seen speaking. It's all about peace for them. They're not talking about retribution generally. You know, they seem to be quite operating in a really good heart. Less so some of the others, as you say, with the rhetoric that's being used and everything else. So, you know, legislate for peace, releasing frequencies of love and peace into that area. You know, do whatever the Father shows you to do, but it's never going to be a warfare type dynamic. But I do believe people are, you know, I've been very impressed by the way generally people have responded to this whole thing and come together in agreement for peace. You know, no one, very few people are rattling the saber for war. So they're looking at how can we bring about peace here? What do we need to do? And the sanctions and everything else are their attempt to try and bring about a peace. And I'm not against that per se, because that's a political solution and they're politicians. So they're doing what they know what to do. You couldn't expect them to be so sitting in the courts of heaven and doing something there when they don't know how to do that. So they're doing what they do know how to do. And from that perspective, they're trying to show solidarity with Ukraine against the aggressors in the situation to bring about change. And they're hoping that the people in Russia will probably rise up and stop it, which is probably the most likely thing to happen in the long run. All the people who are now suffering, particularly the most rich people who have the most influence, they're not going to put up with this forever. And I do think the likelihood is they may well put their influence into the situation that then that president will be removed. Now, hopefully not by being killed. I don't want anyone to be killed, but their power taken away, and then they can withdraw from Ukraine and get back to normal things. And there's probably back channel conversations going on right now, probably the CIA and others, who may well be contacting back channels to generals in Russia to say, look, we'll support you if you are looking to do this. You know, who knows what's going on, but I do think in general the message has been for peace and not war. You know, I know people want a no-fly zone and that potential, and people are providing them to defend themselves. You know, no one's given them a nuclear weapon to go and shoot it at Russia. They're giving them defensive air cover and things like that. But I have been impressed by the way the world is united in this, and it's come together pretty unanimously. Very few countries have been in opposition to it. Some have abstained because of their connections to Russia or whatever else. But generally speaking, things, you know, it's like, but we should be legislating for peace. And, you know, praying for the wisdom of those in the political arena, that they would make the wisest political decisions they can make. They are only political decisions, but they are politicians. You know, therefore, you want them to make the wisest political decisions. But we should be obviously legislating what is the Father's heart? How can we bring about in the heavens establishing peace? Let's do that by making sure we're operating in peace ourselves, administrating that peace, legislating for peace, and doing whatever it is the Father shows us to do. But, you know, some of the crazies out there, you know, it's just madness. You know, the same people who were, you know, beyond the, you know, the last political situation in the US and whatever, the election and all that, same stuff behind it, QAnon stuff behind it, all this stuff in, it's God is not doing that. He wasn't doing it then. He's not doing it now. He won't do it. That is people trying to come up with this mad situation that God is doing this because they're bought into, well, there's trafficking in Ukraine, there's this in Ukraine, there's that in Ukraine, and God is using Putin to cleanse. No, he's not. He really isn't, because that's not what God is like. Now, you can look in any country in the world and you'll find bad things going on. But I do believe there is a global system that keeps all this conflict going and thrives in it. I mean, who are making the most money at the moment? The arms dealers. They're making the most money. Well, who are they? And who controls them? So ultimately, the world systems function on four things: division, conflict, competition first, and then the conflict and warmongering, and then tribalism. And if they can keep people apart at each other, then they thrive. And that's where the money is, the finances control most of that, because that's where the money is. Who's making the money? The banks, because they're loaning a whole load of money to buy more weapons. It's like governments just don't have a pot of money they can just pull out of thin air. They borrow it when they buy more weapons and more things. Well, who are they borrowing it from? And what interest rates are they paying? That is really where the whole control of world economics and world politics is. And we've got to see the kingdom of God does not function that way. Kingdom of God is a kingdom of love. And ultimately, the four angelic orders that are completely contradictory and how God kingdom functions is union, covenant, peacemaking, and family. And that is what God's desire for the world is, for the world to function in those dynamics and be in one heart and mind and purpose, and be demonstrating love to one another, not hatred, warfare based in conflict, because we separate and divide on the basis of what? Ideologies, color, where we've been, where we're born. It's like all of that. We're all God's children. He doesn't see us any different, but we've created nations, and then we've used the idea of nations to create division, because we divided the world up on the basis of nations rather than family. And as a result of that, then nations fight against one another for usually over money of various sorts: territory, possessions, oil, whatever it might be. It's a huge issue over oil. They're still not turned off the oil and gas supplies from the US, from Russia. Why? Because US is totally afraid that the price of petrol or gas would go through the roof, even more than it is right now. And they're not prepared for the backlash for that. So they're still buying oil from them. Well, that's still giving them money. Therefore, they're using that money to support their economy and therefore buy weapons and all of that. So, bottom line is, ultimately, I think people are going to have to make a decision on some short-term pain for their nation in support of another nation who's going through a long period of pain. And, therefore, that's where people have got to say, okay, not only am I willing to put my hand in my pocket and maybe send some money to support what's going on in Ukraine in terms of the crisis there with people and medicine and everything else, but actually I'm willing to pay more in the short term to bring this to a peaceful conclusion quickly. But, those are all things which people have to assess where their own thinking is and their own heart is, because I see all the Facebook posts of, with the gas prices going up, and everyone who's going to get the blame. Well, the government, president, he'll get the blame. And they'll then, look at this is all his beard doing. And the world's in crisis. The world's been in crisis for the last 2 years, hasn't it? I mean, over everything. You can't say this is no president in the world that's ever faced this type of thing in the same way as what was been facing for the last 2 years. And the politicians are, I'm not in support of any party. I'm not partisan, but they're trying their best, I think, in a hugely difficult situation, and we should be trying to support them, not undermine them or criticize them or, you know, be negative at this moment. Let's make sure we're representing them before God in love and really wanting for them to receive godly wisdom. They will receive supernatural wisdom out of heaven in dreams or angelic visitations that will come and visit them in the Oval Office or in number 10 Downing Street or whatever, and give them insight, wisdom to know what to do. Because if I was in that position, I had no idea what to do in a natural sense, you know. And actually, you know, they have only got politics to be able to fall back on. You know, well, we've got something more. Let's use it and let the sons of God really function judicially, governmentally, in love, and administrate the kingdom into this. It may not be a short-term thing, but you just don't know what's going on behind the scenes in the spiritual realm that is making an impact, that is keeping things from escalating and getting worse. You know, there's no way that I'm going to accept nuclear war, because I know God wants to restore the planet. He doesn't want to restore a nuclear wasteland. He wants to restore the planet as it is, and he wants the planet. And therefore, I'm also legislating with the planet itself that the planet won't respond negatively to the pressure that's going on in the atmospheres, because often you get the planet responding to us because of the way we're operating. I mean, how many bombs are falling on the planet, on the ground? You know, how much blood is there being poured into the ground? And the planet responds. You know, it's sentient. So we've got to also legislate with the planet itself to make sure that there's not earthquakes, eruptions. Also, that is where pressure gets released often, in a sort of sense of the elementals of the earth and the stuff that's going on. So it's a complex scenario, and I don't have, you know, obviously I don't have the answers. I just know what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is to legislate for peace, releasing peace frequencies, looking to legislate that peace in any way that the Father shows me, to try and align myself to his heart, make sure that I keep my attitude right, that I don't get angry, you know, resentful against whoever, and do whatever I can to, you know, protect people. I believe you'll find that there will be supernatural testimonies of people protecting. I'm sending legions of angels out, looking for supernatural protection to protect people from, you know, what's going on. You know, and you'll hear stories of that, I think, and I'm sure others are also doing that. That there will be, you know, stories, just like there were in other things where, you know, like 9/11, you heard all these stories of what happened. It's like, oh, all of a sudden someone didn't go into work, or they just did something else, and then something else happened, and they were miraculously rescued from a situation where they should have died. I mean, because God's at work, and if we're administrating, then he can also be at work in how we're administrating it in that way. But, you know, obviously a difficult scenario that we should try and make sure we dial everything down as much as we can, and keep releasing peace and love and joy into those situations, and maintain that ourselves, and make sure we don't get into fear. You know, and the media are not the best at promoting anything good. They ramp up the fear, you know. So, you know, don't believe everything you see, read, hear. Just make sure you have your discernment comes from the spirit realm and from your spirit, not just immediately latching onto something and something else, because you'll hear all sorts of misinformation from both sides of this scenario, because that's what you do. No one wants to admit what really is going on, because that could destabilize things further. Russia are never going to admit how many troops they're losing, or how many commanders they've lost, or how many planes have been shot down or tanks destroyed. They just won't. And Ukraine also, they're basically trying to continue to encourage their things to be in faith, believing that they're going to win this, that they're going to stand and resist, and they're not going to lose out, whatever, you know. So you know, don't be careful. You just don't believe anything you're seeing in the news or media necessarily. But, you know, you're seeing the pictures, and the pictures don't lie, but the pictures can be manipulated. So be discerning in what you're watching, what you're seeing, how you're responding to it. And, you know, let's start releasing love into this dynamic, and see the world come together and awaken to love. You know, love is the only answer. When you love someone, you don't bomb them. You know, you don't kill them. You don't steal from them. You bless them. And let's make sure we bless those who we may see right now as being enemies. What is blessing them? Wanting God's best for them. So the best thing that can happen right now is that Putin could have an angelic encounter, have a heavenly encounter, and have a revelation of God's love and be totally transformed. You know, that would change the situation, because all of a sudden he would realize what he's doing is totally contradictory to the love of God. You know, even though he says he's a believer and a Russian Orthodox believer, he doesn't know God, otherwise he wouldn't be doing this. So for him to know God will be the best solution right now. You know, definitely not assassinating him, because that will create a martyrdom situation in Russia, which will then escalate things. You know, assassinating a leader is never the right thing. You know, let's see his life transformed. That's the best thing. You know, so therefore, let's keep releasing forgiveness and really looking for him to be blessed. Not his endeavors blessed, or what he's doing blessed. You know, it's not, you don't have to sit around passive. You can be active. I'm legislating for the Russian vehicles to break down, run out of fuel, not be able to attack, weapons not going off, things not uniting, bombs not actually going off. I mean, why not? Let's be positive, and let's legislate for peace, because that means more peace when a bomb doesn't go off, or a truck can't get to, or the troops don't there. And so also start legislating for the troops themselves to come for an awakening and to desert and refuse to fire. You know, because he's never gonna win without an army. So it's grassroots change that ultimately begins to change. Yeah, more protests in Russia, that the people won't stand for it. The oligarchs won't stand for it. You know, so we don't have to be passive, but also we must make sure we're not aggressive and angry in that way. So. Yeah.